fierce, well-trained, well-disciplined warriors. They surrounded the jackals. And my friend, whose name is Jack, who happens incidentally today to be making a very large fortune, tax-free, in Iraq, working for the U.S. government, doing things that the U.S. government is not allowed to hire people to do. Jack told me that it was one of the few times in his life when he figured he would not get out alive and had time to think about it. Usually he didn't have time to think about it. You only have time to react, and his reactions are usually very good. But they hijacked this Air India 707, flew it to Durban, which we all watched on the news. Once it was surrounded by the South African security forces, they got on the phone to the airplane and discovered that the 46 guys on the airplane, well, it's been reduced now to 59, 7 were left behind, taken captive in Seychelles, that these guys on the airplane were their drinking buddies and their teachers. These mercenaries who had gone in were the teachers of the highest security force. And so a deal was struck. These guys gave themselves up, they were put on trial, sent to prison in South Africa, given their own wing in the prison with lots of booze, television, women, whatever they wanted, and after 3 months, quietly released, every one of them. And a couple of dozen of them today are together in Iraq, working for you, on your taxpayer dollars, making a lot of money, and they make it tax-free. Now, that tells you a lot about how things work. But there's a little bit more to the story here even than that, because it sounds like a failure, doesn't it? Nobody did what they were supposed to do. We economic hitmen didn't do our job. Jackals failed. But actually, it was a huge success. These 7 guys that were taken captive in the Seychelles, the president of South Africa sent $3 million to Francis Rene, and he released those guys. And he got $3 million. That same year, 1981, was the year when, in May of 1981, Jaime Roldos, because of my failure as an economic hitman, was assassinated by the jackals. And that was in May. What?
Plane crash assassination.
Yes, plane crash assassination. Exactly the same plane, a Twin Otter, crashed 2 months later in Ecuador, killing Jaime Roldos, the president of Ecuador. And we know how the planes crashed. They were being guided from the ground. Their instrument panels were being disrupted, so they thought they were a lot higher than they truly were. Well, I don't know personally about Wellstone, but your guess is as good as mine. So in any case, Francis Rene was very aware of what happened to Jaime Roldos and Omar Torrijos. He was aware that his life was this close to ending and his government overthrown. He received $3 million and he became our friend. He never exposed Diego Garcia. As I mentioned earlier, the BBC is in the process of doing that today. And he never tried to throw us out. He served as president until 2002 when his vice president was elected president of Seychelles. And so, in fact, we won. And it's a good example of how this whole system works that most of us aren't aware of. I think one of the very, very deeply concerning aspects of this for me is that I've heard in recent elections about how our elections might have been stolen. I live in Florida. I live in Palm Beach County, Florida. Chads, stolen elections. But I don't really think that's nearly as big a threat to our democracy as the fact that most Americans have no idea about the most vital aspect of our foreign policy. And a democracy is based on a supposition that the electorate is informed. If we're not informed, if we don't understand this, how can we be a democracy? I don't think we are, not because of stolen elections or chads, but because most of us just don't know. And that's the main reason why I wrote Confessions of an Economic Hitman and Secret History of the American Empire. So, just a couple of stories. There's a lot more of that type in these books, but I don't want to spend any more time on that. I would rather move into the more positive aspects of how do we change this? How do we turn this around? Because we absolutely must turn it around. We have to turn it around. We know this is a failed system. We know it cannot continue. We also know that empires always collapse. And when an empire collapses, a vacuum is created, wars occur, a new empire arrives, and we don't want that. We don't want this empire to collapse. We want to transform it. We want to shapeshift it. We want to change the dream. We want to change the perception. We want to change the paradigm. We must do that. And I think we're in a very unique position. We are a country with incredible ideals of the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, ideals that everybody in the world respects. People often call presidents like Rafael Correa of Ecuador and Evo Morales of Bolivia and Hugo Chavez of Venezuela anti-American. I know all these people. They're not anti-American. They believe very strongly in our ideals. They are anti-exploitation. And you can think what you want about their personalities. I have a lot of trouble with Chavez's personality, frankly. But anti-American, he is not. Anti-exploitation, he is. And so we have these amazing ideals. We are an amazing people. We have incredible power around the world to influence the world. And so what I feel is that at this point in time, we are uniquely qualified and uniquely ready to truly establish a model that will create a world that is sustainable, stable, and peaceful. And we must recognize, and I say again, that the only way, I'm about to become a grandfather. September 20th, my daughter's due to deliver me a grandson. The only way my grandson is going to be able to expect to inherit a peaceful, sustainable, and stable world is if every child born in Botswana, in Bolivia, and in the Philippines has that same expectation. That is the only way. This is our homeland. This world is our homeland. So how do we create such a world? How do we go about doing it? And I think part of that question has to be answered. We have to look at the root causes. And the root causes to what we have right now are today's emperor. You know, an empire has to have an emperor. This isn't George Bush. Sorry to disappoint you. We've had the same emperor regardless of whether we have a Democrat or Republican in the White House or running Congress. It doesn't really matter from that global standpoint. It matters in many other ways. But the real emperor today, or the equivalent of the emperor, are a group of people I call the corporatocracy, the people who run our biggest corporations. They truly run the world. And every politician in this country is beholden to them. They finance all the political campaigns. I'm shocked to hear that in this next election, we've been told that both of the two final candidates, the Republican and Democrat alike, are going to have to spend $500 million. And I ask you, how much of that money is going to come from you or me? It's going to come from the corporations or those people who reap the profits of the corporations. And so our candidates really are beholden to the corporations. Our media is very beholden to the corporations, either owned outright by them or through advertising. And so it's the corporations that really are in charge here. When I grew up as a kid, we used to think of the globe as this big ball, you know, with 185 some odd countries. A few of them were very powerful, like the Soviet Union and the United States in those days, and then it just became the United States. We became the big powerhouse. But today, that's an archaic view of the world. Today, we can better see this as a globe that's surrounded by huge clouds that drift all around the globe and know no national boundaries. And these are the big corporations. They control everything. They work very closely with China, as well as with us, with India, with every government out there. They use whatever laws best suit them. And so it is those corporations that must be changed, that we must address. Today, those corporations have as their primary goal making a few rich people a lot richer in the short run. Today, next week, next month, this quarter. We must change that. The corporation is our most prominent community. Probably more of you, well, I don't know, I'm in Berkeley, maybe this isn't true here. But in every place else, more people relate to the corporation than any other community, than a town, a village, a city, a state, a country. Corporations run our lives. They are our main community. And so we must convince them that their primary job, their primary responsibility is to take care of us, to be good